Welcome everybody, and today we're going to compare these two bourbons. We're looking at these two bourbons, the Woodford Reserve Double Oaked and the Jim Beam Double Oak, because they leverage a similar process for bottling these slightly more expensive versions of their regular label products. Both of these bourbons are aged in charred oak barrels, and then they're transferred over into a second set of charred oak barrels allowed to age before they're bottled. We're going to start by talking about the Woodford Reserve Double Oaked. Regular label Woodford Reserve is aged 6 to 7 years in charred oak barrels, and the Woodford Reserve Double Oaked is transferred into a second set of charred oak barrels where it stays for about 6 to 7 months. As far as the looks of it, when you're seeing it on the shelf, the Woodford Reserve bottle is refined. It's got classy branding, but it's not over the top. It is a corked bottle. Overall, it's a classy bottle. Looks good. It's known. It's recognizable. Good to go. Double Oaked is 90.4 proof, so it's not too hot. It kind of lives in that 90 to 100 range, which is actually a pretty good range in my opinion. As far as the aromas that I get off of the Woodford Reserve, I get oak, I get vanilla, maybe like an apple. Those aromas are definitely followed up with just a tiny hint, a little bit of an earthiness on there as well. All right, and diving right into the Double Oaked, the flavor notes that I get are charred oak, a maple syrup, a vanilla, and caramel. The maple syrup is definitely there. This is a very rounded flavor profile. It's balanced. The flavors are deep. It's a very sweet flavor profile. It's a sweet bourbon. This is definitely an outstanding bourbon in my opinion. It's not too hot, coming in at 90.4 proof, and for $50 to $60, it's tough to beat Woodford Reserve Double Oaked. All right, moving on to the Jim Beam Double Oak. From what I understand, this did come out a few years after the Woodford Reserve came out. So maybe they looked at that process and thought that it might be something that would complement the flavor profile of regular white label Jim Beam. Regular white label Jim Beam is aged for 4 years. Once that process is finished for the Double Oak, they take it, they put it into a second set of fresh charred oak barrels, and that aging process for it to taste the way that they want it to could be, anywhere from a week, 2 months, 6 months. They don't really give that information, but there is that second aging process that takes place. The bottle itself is fancy, obviously very recognizable, and the branding is upscale, and it kind of adds that little extra level to the regular Jim Beam label. I think they did a really good job on the branding with this one. Jim Beam Double Oak is 86 proof, and while that is under that 90 to 100 or 110 range that I like, that I mentioned earlier, I find that this drink's pretty good. It's nice and smooth, so I don't mind that it's a little bit lower than 90 proof for me personally. As far as the aromas that I get off of Jim Beam Double Oak, it's a little bit flat, it's a little bit muted. I always get a freshness off of it. Do get a little bit of that charred oak, a sweet grain, I get peanuts, and a little bit of vanilla on there as well. As far as the flavor notes off of the Jim Beam Double Oak, a nuttiness, a caramel, grain, that charred oak comes through. A lot like the aromas for me. The flavor profile is a little bit muted. It's a little bit flat, but it is a very smooth bourbon. It's got a balanced flavor profile, and it is very drinkable. Because it is so smooth and it's 86 proof, goes down pretty easy. It's a nice bourbon. I don't mind it at all. Overall, this is a very drinkable bourbon. There's nothing wrong with the flavor profile. It's definitely not as good or as sweet as the Woodford Reserve Double Oaked, but it does have its own sweetness in there, and it is very smooth, like I keep saying. It tastes good. It's approachable. I think this is a great bottle of bourbon to have if you know you're having 1 or 2 of your buddies over. You're going to have 2 or 3 cigars. It's going to be a long night. You're going to go through a bottle. No one's focusing on flavor notes. Everyone's just trying to have a good time. This is a good bottle for that occasion. If you're by yourself and you really want to take your time, you're going to have a good cigar, I think that the Woodford Reserve Double Oak is probably the way to go, and in my opinion, is the one that I would pick in most situations between these two. I definitely like the Woodford Reserve Double Oaked more, but like I said, this is approachable, it's smooth, it's cheaper at $20 a bottle. So there you have it. Overall, I think that the Woodford Reserve Double Oaked is a more enjoyable pour. I like it because the flavor profile is deeper, there's more notes to pick out in there, and it is sweeter. And while the Jim Beam Double Oak does have a little bit of a muted profile, I think that it's very smooth and balanced, and also a very approachable whiskey that's very good and that I like. So, that is it from me. That's all I have to say today. As always, thanks for watching. I appreciate the views, and have a good one.